Hello. Merry Christmas Eve. Merry Christmas Eve, everyone. It's good to see you. I completely understand that some of you are gonna be busy, are gonna be with your families, with your guests. So don't worry about it at all. Take care of the more important things, not the stream. And thank you for my reading classes. Granny needs these in order to read you the story. Yeah, thank you, I appreciate it. Exactly. Thank you. But yeah, hello everyone. Good to see you. I hope you're having a good one. I hope you like our cozy fireplace. Santa will bring an extra gift to the person who recognizes where our background is from. Yeah, I'm gonna talk to Santa and tell him to give you an extra present if you can recognize the background. It is Hades. Congrats, Mom. You're gonna get an extra present from imaginary Santa. But yeah, it's gonna be, this stream is gonna be pretty much me reading the story. I put up a pinned message mentioning that there won't be a lot of chat interaction. Once I start the story, I'd like to focus on that. So, I hope you guys can completely get into a relaxing mood. Maybe lay down in bed, close your eyes while you're listening to the story. Things like that. I hope you cannot hear the wind. It's really, really windy here, and the wind is going in my apartment. I hope you cannot hear it. I'm not sure, but it's a bit scary. I don't want that to clash with the cozy atmosphere that I'm creating. No, this is my Blue Yeti. I thought for the reading, at least, my 3DO would be a bit too clunky and also a bit harder to switch from one ear to the other. So I'm doing this with the Blue Yeti. The Blue Yeti is not my regular microphone. My stream microphone is not stereo, but this one is a little bit so. A little bit of a head massage before we start. Thank you for the follow, Kurosoda. The story we're reading today is called Told After Supper by Jerome. Jerome. It's more like a collection of short stories, and while they're meant to be ghost stories, Jerome has a bit of a humorous, funny way of telling them, so they're kind of like comedy horror. Does that exist? I hope that exists. I'm not sure. But yeah, that's kind of the vibe that we're gonna have. I hope you enjoy in general what I did to our screen. Do you like how you can see the light from the fire on my back? You see. I like it so much. It's so cool. Okie dokie. I'll get started so you guys get cozy. I hope my head position is gonna be. Does it look like I'm looking at the book? Yeah, it kind of does. Okay, perfect. I got everything set up. Let's get started. It was Christmas Eve. I begin this way because it is the proper, orthodox, respectable way to begin. And I have been brought up in a proper, orthodox, respectable way and taught to always do the proper, orthodox, respectable thing. And the habit clings to me. Of course, as a mere matter of information, it is quite unnecessary to mention the date at all. Oh, sorry. Okay. The experienced reader knows it was Christmas Eve without my telling him. It is always Christmas Eve in a ghost story. Christmas Eve is the ghost's great gala night. On Christmas Eve, they hold their annual fete. On Christmas Eve, everybody in Ghostland who is anybody, or rather, speaking of ghosts, one should say, I suppose, nobody who is anybody comes out to show himself or herself, to see and to be seen, to promenade about and display their winding sheets and grave clothes to each other, to criticize one another's style and sneer at one another's complexion. Christmas Eve parade, as I expect they themselves term it, is a function, doubtless, eagerly prepared for and looked forward to throughout Ghostland, especially the swagger set, such as the murdered barons, the crime-stained countesses, and the earls who came over with the conqueror and assassinated their relatives and died raving mad. Hollow moans and fiendish grins are, one may be sure, energetically practiced up. Blood-curdling shrieks and marrow-freezing gestures are probably rehearsed for weeks beforehand. Rusty chains and gory daggers are overhauled and put into good working order, and sheets and shrouds laid carefully by from the previous year's show are taken down and shaken out and mended and aired. Oh, it is a stirring night in Ghostland, the night of December the 24th. Ghosts never come out on Christmas night itself, you may have noticed. Christmas Eve, we suspect, has been too much for them. They are not used to excitement. For about a week after Christmas Eve, the gentlemen ghosts, no doubt, feel as if they were all head and go about making solemn resolutions to themselves that they will stop in next Christmas Eve, while lady specters are contradictory and snappish and liable to burst into tears and leave the room hurriedly on being spoken to for no perceptible cause whatsoever. Ghosts with no position to maintain mere middle-class ghosts. Occasionally, I believe, do a little hunting on off nights, on All Hallows Eve and at Midsummer, and some will even run up for a mere local event to celebrate, for instance, the anniversary of the hanging of somebody's grandfather, or to prophesy a misfortune. He does love prophesying a misfortune, does the average British ghost. Send him out to prognosticate trouble to somebody, and he's happy. Let him foresee his way into a peaceful home, and turn the whole house upside down by foretelling a funeral, or predicting a bankruptcy, or hinting at a coming disgrace, or some other terrible disaster. about which nobody in their senses would want to know sooner than they could possibly help, and the prior knowledge of which can serve no useful purpose whatsoever. And he feels that he is combining duty with pleasure. He would have forgiven himself if anybody in his family had a trouble, and he had not been there for a couple of months beforehand, doing silly tricks on the lawn or balancing himself on somebody's bed rail. Then there are, besides, the very young or very conscientious ghosts with a lost will or an undiscovered number weighing heavy on their minds, will haunt steadily all the year round. And also the fuzzy ghost who is indignant at having been buried in the dustbin or in the village pond, and who never gives the parish a single night's quiet until somebody has paid for a first-class funeral for him. But these are the exceptions. As I have said, the average orthodox ghost does his one turn a year on Christmas Eve and is satisfied. Why on Christmas Eve, of all nights in the year, I never could myself understand. It is invariably one of the most dismal of nights to be out in. Cold, muddy, and wet. And besides, at Christmas time, everybody has quite enough to put up with in the way of houseful of living relations without wanting the ghosts of any dead ones mooning about the place, I'm sure. There must be something ghostly in the air of Christmas, something about the close, muggy atmosphere that draws up the ghosts, like the dampness of the summer rains brings out the frogs and snails. And not only do ghosts themselves always walk on Christmas Eve, but the live people always sit and talk about them on Christmas Eve. Whenever 5 or 6 English-speaking people meet around a fire on Christmas Eve, they start telling each other ghost stories. Nothing satisfies us on Christmas Eve but to hear each other tell authentic anecdotes about specters. It is a genial, festive season, and we love to muse upon graves and dead bodies and murders and blood. There is a good deal of similarity about our ghostly experiences, but this, of course, is not our fault, but the fault of ghosts, who never will try any new performances, but always will keep steadily to old, safe business. The consequence is that when you have been on one Christmas Eve party and heard 6 people relate their adventures with spirits, you do not require to hear any more ghost stories. To listen to any further ghost stories after that would be like sitting out 2 farcical comedies or digging into comic journals. The repetition would become wearisome. There is always the young man who was, one year, spending the Christmas at a country house, and on Christmas Eve, they put him to sleep in the west wing. Then in the middle of the night, the room door quietly opens, and somebody, generally a lady in her nightdress, walks slowly in and comes and sits on the bed. The young man thinks it must be one of the visitors or some relative of the family, though he does not remember having previously seen her, who, unable to sleep and feeling lonesome all by herself, has come into his room for a chat. He has no idea it is a ghost. He is so unsuspicious. She does not speak, however, and when he looks again, she is gone. The young man relates the circumstance of the breakfast table next morning and asks each of the ladies present if it were she who was his visitor, but they all assure him that it was not, and the host, who has grown deadly pale, begs him to say no more about the matter, which strikes the young man a singularly strange request. After breakfast, the host takes the young man into a corner and explains to him that what he saw was the ghost of a lady who had been murdered in that very bed, or who had murdered somebody else there. It does not really matter which. You can be a ghost by murdering somebody else, or by being murdered yourself, whichever you prefer. The murdered ghost is, perhaps, the more popular, but on the other hand, you can frighten people better if you are the murdered one, because then you can show your wounds and do groans. I think I'm gonna switch to a soft voice because whispering is getting a bit hard, and my voice keeps tending to go to softly speaking. So we're gonna do that. Or I'm gonna switch between them. I don't even know myself. Then there is the skeptical guest. It is always the guest who gets let in for this sort of thing, by the by. A ghost never thinks much of his own family. It is the guest he likes to haunt, who, after listening to the host's ghost story on Christmas Eve, laughs at it and says that he does not believe there are such things as ghosts at all, and that he will sleep in the haunted chamber that very night if they will let him. Everybody urges him not to be reckless, but he persists in his foolhardiness and goes up to the yellow chamber, or whatever color the haunted room may be, with a light heart and a candle, and wishes them all good night and shuts the door. Next morning, he has got snow white hair. How fitting, just like me. He does not tell anybody what he has seen. It is too awful. There is also the plucky guest who sees a ghost and knows it is a ghost and watches it as it comes into the room and disappears through the wainscot. After which, as the ghost does not seem to be coming back, and there is nothing, consequently, to be gained by stopping awake, he goes to sleep. He does not mention having seen the ghost to anybody, for fear of frightening them. Some people are so nervous about ghosts, but determines to wait for the next night and see if the apparition appears again. It does appear again, and this time he gets out of bed, dresses himself and does his hair, and follows it, and then discovers a secret passage leading from the bedroom down into the beer cellar, a passage which, no doubt, was not unfrequently made use of in the bad old days of yore. After him comes the young man who woke up with the strange sensation in the middle of the night and found his rich bachelor uncle standing by his bedside. The rich uncle smiled a weird sort of smile and vanished. The young man immediately got up and looked at his watch. It had stopped at 4:30, he having forgotten to wind it. Okay, I'm gonna stop for a second because, oh my god, this looks so good with the background. Thank you for the hair color. Isn't this so pretty? Oh my god. He made inquiries the next day and found that, strangely enough, his rich uncle, whose only nephew he was, had married a widow with 11 children at exactly 11:45, only 2 days ago. The young man does not attempt to explain the circumstance. All he does is to vouch for the truth of his narrative. And, to mention another case, there is the gentleman who is returning home late at night from a Freemason's dinner, and who, noticing a light issuing from a ruined abbey, creeps up and looks through the keyhole. He sees the ghost of a grey sister kissing the ghost of a brown monk, and is so inexpressibly shocked and frightened that he faints on the spot, and is discovered there the next morning, lying in a heap against the door, still speechless, and with his faithful latchkey clasped tightly in his hand. All these things happen on Christmas Eve. They are all told of on Christmas Eve. For ghost stories to be told on any other evening than the evening of the 24th of December would be impossible in English society, as at present regulated. Therefore, in introducing the sad but authentic ghost stories that follow hereafter, I feel that it is unnecessary to inform the student of Anglo-Saxon literature that the date on which they were told and on which the incidents took place was Christmas tree. Nevertheless, I do so. Now, the stories came to be told. It was Christmas Eve. Who would have guessed? Christmas Eve at my Uncle John's. Christmas Eve. 3 is too much Christmas Eve about this book. I can see that myself. It is beginning to get monotonous, even to me. But I don't see how to avoid it now. At number 47, Laburnham Grove, Tooting. Christmas Eve in the dimly lighted front parlor, where the flickering firelight threw strange shadows on the highly colored wallpaper, while without, in the wild street, the storm raged pitilessly, and the wind, like some unquiet spirit, flew moaning across the square, and passed wailing with a troubled cry round by the milk shop. We had had supper and were waiting round, talking and smoking. We had had a very good supper. A very good supper indeed. Unpleasantness has occurred since in our family in connection with this party. Rumors have been put about in our family concerning the matter generally, but more particularly concerning my own share in it. The remarks have been passed which have not so much surprised me, because I know what our family are, but which have pained me very much. As for my Aunt Maria, I do not know when I shall care to see her again. I should have thought Aunt Maria might have known me better. But although injustice, gross injustice, as I shall explain later on, has been done to myself, that shall not deter me from doing justice to others, even to those who have made unfeeling insinuations. I will do justice to Aunt Maria's hot veal pasties and toasted lobsters, followed by her own special make of cheesecakes, warm, and washed down by Uncle John's own particular old ale, and acknowledge that they were most tasty. I did justice to them then. Aunt Maria herself could not but admit that. After supper, Uncle brewed some whiskey punch. I did justice to that also. Uncle John himself said so. He said he was glad to notice that I liked it. Aunt went to bed soon after supper, leaving the local curate, old Dr. Scrubbles, Mr. Samuel Coombs, our member of the county council, Teddy Biffles, and myself to keep Uncle company. We agreed that it was too early to give in for some time yet, so Uncle brewed another bowl of punch, and I think we all did justice to that. At least, I know I did. It is a passion with me, is the desires to do justice. We sat up for a long while, and the doctor brewed some gin punch later on, for a change, though I could not taste much difference myself. But it was all good, and we were very happy. Everybody was so kind. Uncle John told us a very funny story in the course of the evening. Oh, it was a funny story. I forget what it was about now, but I know it amused me very much at the time. I do not think I ever laughed so much in all my life. It is strange that I cannot recollect the story too,
because he told us 4 times, and it was entirely our own fault that he did not tell it as a 5th. After that, the doctor sang a very clever song, in the course of which he imitated all the different animals in a farmyard. What the heck? He did mix them a bit. He brayed for the bandman cock and browed for the pig, but we knew what he meant all right. I think they might have been very drunk, huh? I started relating a most interesting anecdote, but was somewhat surprised to observe, as I went on, that nobody was paying the slightest attention to me whatever. I thought this rather rude of them at first, until it dawned upon me that I was talking to myself all the time, instead of out loud, so that of course they did not know that I was telling them a tale at all, and were probably puzzled to understand the meaning of my animated expression and eloquent gestures. It was a most curious mistake for anyone to make. I never knew such a thing happened to me before. Later on, our curate did tricks with cards. He asked us if we had ever seen a game called 3-card trick. He said it was an artifice by means of which low, unscrupulous men, frequenters of race meetings and such like hounds, swindled foolish young fellows out of their money. He said it was a very simple trick to do. It all depended on the quickness of the hand. It was the quickness of the hand deceived the eye. He said he would show us the imposture so that we might be warned against it and not be taken in by it. And he fetched Uncle's pack of cards from the tea caddy and, selecting 3 cards from the pack, 2 plain cards and 1 picture card, sat down on the hearthrug and explained to us what he was going to do. He said, "Now I shall take these 3 cards in my hand, so, and let you all see them, and then I shall quietly lay them down on the rug, with the backs uppermost, and ask you to pick out the picture card, and you'll think you know which one it is." And he did it. Oh, Mr. Crooms, who is also one of our church wardens, said it was the middle card. "You fancy you saw it," said our curate, smiling. "I don't fancy anything at all about it," replied Mr. Coombs. "I tell you it's the middle card. I'll bet you $50 it's the middle card." "There you are! That's just what I was explaining to you," said our curate, turning to the rest of us. "That's the way these foolish young fellows that I was speaking of are lured on to lose their money. They make sure they know the card. They fancy they saw it. They don't grasp the idea that it is in the quickness of the hand that has deceived their eye." He said he had known young men go off to a boat race or a cricket match with pounds in their pocket and come home early in the afternoon stone broke, having lost all their money at this demoralizing game. He said he should take Mr. Coombs' half-crown because it would teach Mr. Coombs a very useful lesson and probably be the means of saving Mr. Coombs' money in the future, and he should give the 2 and 6 pence to the blanket fund. "Don't you worry about that," retorted old Mr. Coombs. "Don't you take the half-crown out of the blanket fund. That's all." And he put his money on the middle card and turned it up. Sure enough, it really was the Queen. We were all very much surprised, especially the curate. He said that it did sometimes happen that way though, that a man did sometimes lay on the right card by accident. Our curate said it was, however, the most unfortunate thing a man could do for himself, if he only knew it, because when a man tried and won, it gave him a taste for the so-called sport, and it lured him on into risking again and again, until he had to retire from the contest, a broken and ruined man. Then he did the trick again. Mr. Coombs said it was the card next to the coal scuttle this time, and wanted to put 5 shillings on it. We laughed at him and tried to persuade him against it. He would listen to no advice, however, but insisted on plunging. Our curate said very well then. He had warned him, and that was all that he could do. If Mr. Coombs was determined to make a fool of himself, Mr. Coombs must do so. Our curate said he should take the 5 shillings, and that would put things right again with the blanket fund. So Mr. Coombs put 2 half-crowns on the card next to the coal scuttle and turned it up. Sure enough, it was the Queen again. After that, Uncle John had a florin on, and he won. And then we all played at it, and we all won. Except the curate, that is. He had a very bad quarter of an hour. I never knew a man have such hard luck at cards. He lost every time. We had some more punch after that, and Uncle made such a funny mistake in brewing it. He left out the whiskey. Oh, we did laugh at him, and we made him put in double quantity afterwards as a forfeit. Oh, did we have such a fun that evening. And then, somehow or other, we must have got on to ghosts, because the next recollection I have is that we were all telling ghost stories to each other. Teddy Biffles told the first story. I will let him repeat it here in his own words. Biffles called his story Johnson and Emily, or The Faithful Ghost. I was little more than a lad when I first met with Johnson. I was home for the Christmas holidays, and, it being Christmas Eve, I had been allowed to sit up very late. On opening the door of my little bedroom to go in, I found myself face to face with Johnson, who was coming out. It passed through me, and uttering a long, low wail of misery, disappeared out of the staircase window. I was startled for the moment. I was only a schoolboy at the time, and had never seen a ghost before, and felt a little nervous about going to bed. But, on reflection, I remembered that it was only sinful people that spirits could do any harm to, and so tucked myself up and went to sleep. In the morning, I told the pater what I had seen. "Oh yes, that was old Johnson," he answered. "Don't you be frightened by that. He lives here." And then he told me the poor thing's history. It seemed that Johnson, when it was alive, had loved in early life the daughter of a former lessee of our house, a very beautiful girl whose Christian name had been Emily. Father did not know her other name. Johnson was too poor to marry the girl, so he kissed her goodbye, told her he would soon be back, and went off to Australia to make his fortune. But Australia was not then what it became later on. Travelers through the bush were few and far between in those early days, and even when one was caught, the portable property found upon the body was often of hardly sufficiently negotiable value to pay the simple funeral expenses rendered necessary. So that it took Johnson nearly 20 years to make his fortune. The self-imposed task was accomplished at last, however, and then, having successfully eluded the police and got clear out of the colony, he returned to England, full of hope and joy, to claim his bride. He reached the house to find it silent and deserted. All that the neighbors could tell him was that, soon after his own departure, the family had, on one foggy night, unostentatiously disappeared, and that nobody had ever seen or heard anything of them since, although the landlord and most of the local tradesmen had made searching inquiries. Poor Johnson, frenzied with grief, sought his lost love all over the world, but he never found her, and after years of fruitless effort, he returned to end his lonely life in the very house where, in the happy bygone days, he and his beloved Emily had passed so many blissful hours. He had lived there quite alone, wandering about the empty rooms, weeping and calling to his Emily to come back to him, and when the poor old fellow died, his ghost still kept the business on. It was there, the pater said, when he took the house, and the agent had knocked £10 a year off the rent in consequence. After that, I was continuously meeting Johnson about the place at all times of the night, and so, indeed, were we all. We used to walk round it and stand aside to let it pass at first, but when we grew at home with it, and there seemed no necessity for so much ceremony, we used to walk straight through it. You could not say it was ever much in the way. It was a gentlest, harmless, old ghost too, and we old folk felt very sorry for it, and pitied it. The womenfolk indeed made quite a bet of it for a while. Its faithfulness touched them so. But as time went on, it grew to be a bit of a bore. You see, it was full of sadness. There was nothing cheerful or genial about it. You felt sorry for it, but it irritated you. It would sit on the stairs and cry for hours at a stretch, and whenever we woke up in the night, one was sure to hear it puttering about the passages and in and out of the different rooms, moaning and sighing, so that we could not get to sleep again very easily. And when we had a party on, it would come and sit outside the drawing room door and sob all the time. It did not do anybody any harm exactly, but it cast a gloom over the whole affair. I'm getting sick of this old fool," said the pater one evening, after Johnson had been more of a nuisance than usual and had spoiled a good game of whist by sitting up the chimney and groaning till nobody knew what were trumps and what suit had been led even. "We shall have to get rid of him, somehow or other. I wish I knew how to do so." "Well," said the mater, "depend upon it, you'll never see the last of him until he's found Emily's grave. That's what he is after. You find Emily's grave, and put him on to that, and he'll stop there. That's the only thing to do. You mark my words." The idea seemed reasonable, but the difficulty in the way was that none of us knew where Emily's grave was any more than the ghost of Johnson himself did. The governor suggested palming off some other Emily's grave upon the poor thing, but as luck would have it, there did not seem to have been an Emily of any sort buried anywhere for miles around. I never came across a neighborhood so utterly destitute of dead Emilys. I thought for a bit, and then I hazarded a suggestion myself. "Couldn't we fake up something for the old chap?" I queried. "He seems a simple-minded old sort. He might take it in. Anyhow, we could but try." "By Jove, so we will!" exclaimed my father, and the very next morning we had the workmen in and fixed up a little mound at the bottom of the orchard with a tombstone over it, bearing the following inscription: "Sacred to the memory of Emily, her last words were, 'Tell Johnson I love him.'" "That ought to fetch him," mused the dad as he surveyed the work when finished. "I am sure I hope it does." It did. We lured him down there that very night, and, well, there it was one of the most pathetic things I have ever seen, the way Johnson sprang upon that tombstone and wept. Dad and old Squibbins, the gardener, cried like children when they saw it. Johnson has never troubled us anymore in the house since then. It spends every night now, sobbing on the grave, and seems quite happy. There still? Oh, yes. I'll take you fellows down and show you it next time you come to our place. 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. are its general hours, 10 to 2 on Saturdays. British humor, I swear to God. I don't think I knew what I was getting myself into with these stories. They're not so much spooky as just British funny. The Brits trying to do the funny. Merry Christmas, guys. I don't really get to see the chat while I'm reading, which is the reason that I mentioned that there won't be a lot of chat interaction today. But nonetheless, Merry Christmas. Hope you're having a pleasant evening. Merry Christmas Eve, technically, but also Merry Christmas in general if it's already the 25th to some of you. Hope you're having a pleasant evening and you can just, relax today. Have a good evening. I was gonna say enjoy the chill, but I know it's not, what's it called? Oh, sorry about that. It's not like cold in a lot of places, so nonetheless, hope you're having a good Christmas Eve. After party. Is it though? The eve is the pre-party. It's the party before the party. I can't wait for tomorrow. I'm gonna eat so much good food. It's gonna be delicious. Thank you for the stream. I'm gonna read one more, and then if I'm not really vibing with the spookiness of this, I do have a bunch of others that I have open, and we can switch the story. But let's go through one more from Jerome, Kimmy Jerome. Next up is the doctor's story. It made me cry very much, that story. Young Biffles told it with so much feeling. We were all a little thoughtful after it, and noticed even the old doctor covertly wipe away a tear. Uncle John brewed another bowl of punch, however, and we gradually grew more resigned. The doctor, indeed, after a while became almost cheerful, and told us about the ghost of one of his patients. I cannot give you his story. I wish I could. They all said afterwards that it was the best of the lot, the most ghastly and terrible, but I could not make any sense of it myself. It seemed so incomplete. He began all right, and then something seemed to happen, and then he was finishing it. I cannot make out what he did with the middle of the story. It ended up, I know, however, with somebody finding something, and that would put Mr. Coombs in the mind of a very curious affair that took place at an old mill, once kept by his brother-in-law. Never mind, it was just an interlude, I guess, whatever. Mr. Coombs said he would tell us his story, and before anybody could stop him, he had begun. He said the story was called The Haunted Mill or The Ruined Home. Well, you all know my brother-in-law, Mr. Parkins, began Mr. Coombs, taking the long clay pipe from his mouth and putting it behind his ear. We do not know his brother-in-law, but we said we did, so as to save time. And you know, of course, that he once took a lease of an old mill in Surrey and went to live there. Now, you must know that, years ago, this very mill had been occupied by a wicked old miser who died there, leaving, so it was rumored, all his money hidden somewhere about the place. Naturally enough, everyone who had since come to live at the mill had tried to find the treasure, but none had ever succeeded, and the local wiseacres said that nobody ever would, unless the ghost of the miserly miller should, one day, take a fancy to one of the tenants and disclose to him the secret of the hiding place. My brother-in-law did not attach much importance to the story, regarding it as an old woman's tale, and, unlike his predecessors, made no attempt whatever to discover the hidden gold. Unless business was very different then from what it is now, said my brother-in-law, I don't see how a miller could very much have saved anything, however much of a miser he might have been. At all events, not enough to make it worth the trouble of looking for it. Still, he could not altogether get rid of the idea of that treasure. One night, he went to bed. There was nothing very extraordinary about that, I admit. He often did go to bed of a night. What was remarkable, however, was that exactly as the clock of the village church chimed the last stroke of 12, my brother-in-law woke up with a start and felt himself quite unable to go to sleep again. Joe sat up in bed and looked around. At the foot of the bed, something stood very still, wrapped in shadow. It moved into the moonlight, and then my brother-in-law saw that it was the figure of a wizened little old man in knee breeches and a pigtail. In an instant, the story of the hidden treasure and the old miser flashed across his mind. "He's come to show me where it's hid," thought my brother-in-law, and he resolved that he would not spend all this money on himself, but would devote a small percentage of it towards doing good to others. The apparition moved towards the door. My brother-in-law put on his trousers and followed it. The ghost went downstairs into the kitchen, glided over and stood in front of the hearth, sighed, and disappeared. Next morning, Joe had a couple of bricklayers in and made them haul out the stove and pull down the chimney, while he stood behind with a potato sack in which to put the gold. They knocked down half the wall and never found so much as a 4-penny bit. My brother-in-law did not know what to think. The next night, the old man appeared again, and again led the way into the kitchen. This time, however, instead of going to the fireplace, it stood more in the middle of the room and sighed there. "Ah, I see what he means now," said my brother-in-law to himself. "It's under the floor. Why did the old idiot go and stand up against the stove so as to make me think it was up the chimney?" They spent the next day in taking up the kitchen floor, but the only thing they found was a 3-pronged fork, and the handle of that was broken. On the third night, the ghost reappeared, quite unabashed, and for a third time made for the kitchen. Arrived there, it looked up at the ceiling and vanished. "He don't seem to have learned much sense where he's been to," muttered Joe as he trotted back into bed. "I should have thought he might have done that at first." Still, there seemed no doubt now where the treasure lay, and the first thing after breakfast they started pulling down the ceiling. They got every inch of the ceiling down, and they took up the boards of the room above. They discovered about as much treasure as you would expect to find in an empty quart pot. On the 4th night, when the ghost appeared, as usual, my brother-in-law was too wild that he threw his boots at it, and the boots passed through the body and broke a looking glass. On the 5th night, when Joe awoke, as he always did now at 12, the ghost was standing in a dejected attitude, looking very miserable. There was an appealing look in its large sad eyes that quite touched my brother-in-law. After all, he thought, perhaps the silly chap's doing his best. Maybe he has forgotten where he really did put it and is trying to remember. I'll give him another chance. The ghost appeared grateful and delighted at seeing Joe prepare to follow him, and led the way into the attic, pointed to the ceiling, and vanished. "Well, he's hit it this time, I do hope," said my brother-in-law. And next day they set to work to take the roof off the place. It took them 3 days to get the roof thoroughly off, and all they found was a bird's nest, after securing which they covered up the house with tarpaulins to keep it dry. You might have thought that would have cured the poor fellow of looking for treasure, but it didn't. He said there must be something in it all, or the ghost would never keep on coming as it did, and that, having gone so far, he would go on to the end and solve the mystery, cost what it might. Night after night, he would get out of his bed and follow the spectral old fraud about the house. Each night, the old man would indicate a different place, and on each following day, my brother-in-law would proceed to break up the meal at the point indicated and look for the treasure. At the end of 3 weeks, there was not a room in the mill fit to live in. Every wall had been pulled down, every floor had been taken up, every ceiling had had a hole knocked in it. And then, as suddenly as they had begun, the ghost species ceased, and my brother-in-law was left in peace to rebuild the place at his leisure. What induced the old image to place such a silly trick upon a family man and a ratepayer? Ah, that's just what I cannot tell you. Some said that the ghost of the wicked old man had done it to punish my brother-in-law for not believing in him at first, while others held that the apparition was probably that of some deceased local plumber and glazier who would naturally take an interest in seeing a house knocked about and spoiled. But nobody knew anything for certain. And with that, I'm definitely changing our story. Let me see what else I have here that might be a little bit more entertaining. Yeah, sorry, it's just I'm not vibing with this.
There it is. This doesn't have a reading mode, damn. Can I turn it on somehow? Oh, I can zoom. Perfect. I don't know how scary this one actually is. But it's by Algernon Blackwood, and he does good ghost stories. What else do I have here? We can try it. It's called The Kid Bag by Algernon Blackwood. I'm gonna change the pinned message. Okay, there we go. are reckless. Merry Christmas Eve. Happy holidays to you too. Thanks for stopping by. Okie dokie.
When the words "not guilty" sounded through the crowded courtroom that dark December afternoon, Arthur Will Bramham, the great criminal KC and leader for the triumphant defense, was represented by his junior. But Johnson, his private secretary, carried the verdict across to his chamber like lightning. "It's what we expected, I think," said the barrister without emotion. "And personally, I am glad the case is over." There was no particular sign of pleasure that his defense of John Turk, the murderer, on a plea of insanity, had been successful, for no doubt he felt, as everybody who had watched the case felt, that no man had ever better deserved the gallows. Can I submit even more? Yes. Oh my god. "I'm glad too," said Johnson. He had sat in the court for 10 days watching the face of the man who had carried out with callous detail one of the most brutal and cold-blooded murders of recent years. The counsel glanced up at his secretary. They were more than employer and employed. For family and other reasons, they were friends. "Ah, I remember, yes," he said with a kind smile. "And you want to get away for Christmas? You're going to skate and ski in the Alps, aren't you? If I was your age, I'd come with you." Johnson laughed shortly. He was a young man of 26, with a delicate face like a girl's. "I can catch the morning boat now," he said. "But that's not the reason I'm glad the trial is over. I'm glad it's over because I've seen the last of that man's dreadful face. It positively haunted me. Bad white skin, with the black hair brushed low over the forehead, is a thing I shall never forget. And the description of the way the dismembered body was crammed and packed with lime into that—" Don't dwell on it, my dear fellow," interrupted the other, looking at him curiously out of his keen eyes. "Don't think about it. Such pictures have a trick of coming back when one least wants them." He paused a moment. "Now go," he added presently, "and enjoy your holiday. I shall want all your energy for my parliamentary work when you get back. And don't break your neck skiing." Johnson shook hands and took his leave. At the door, he turned suddenly. "I knew there was something I wanted to ask you," he said. "Would you mind lending me one of your kit bags? It's too late to get one tonight, and I leave in the morning before the shops are open." "Of course. I'll send Henry over with it to your rooms. You shall have it the moment I get home." "I promise to take great care of it," said Johnson gratefully, delighted to think that within 30 hours it would be nearing the brilliant sunshine of the high Alps in winter. He thought of that criminal court was like an evil dream in his mind. He dined at his club and went on to Plumsbury, where he occupied the top floor in one of those old gaunt houses in which the rooms are large and lofty. The floor below his own was vacant and unfurnished, and below that were other lodgers whom he did not know. It was cheerless, and he looked forward heartily to a change. The night was even more cheerless. It was miserable, and few people were about. A cold, sleety rain was driving down the streets before the keenest east wind he had ever felt. It howled dismally among the big, gloomy houses of the great squares and when he reached his rooms, he heard it whistling and shouting over the world of black roofs beyond his windows. In the hall, he met his landlady, shading a candle from the draughts with her thin hand. "This came by a man from Mr. Wilbrim's, sir." She pointed to what was evidently the kit bag, and Johnson thanked her and took it upstairs with him. "I shall be going abroad in the morning for 10 days, Mrs. Monks," he said. "I'll leave an address for letters." "And I hope you'll have a Merry Christmas, sir," she said in a raucous, wheezy voice that suggested spirits, "and better weather than this." "I hope so too," replied her lodger, shuddering a little as the wind went roaring down the street outside. When he got upstairs, he heard the sleet volleying against the window panes. He put his kettle on to make a cup of hot coffee, and then set about putting a few things in order for his absence. "And now I must pack, such as my packing is," he laughed to himself, and set to work at once. He liked the packing, for it brought the snow mountains so vividly before him, and made him forget the unpleasant scenes of the past 10 days. Besides, it was not even elaborate in nature. Oh my god, my tummy. I hope you can't hear it. His friend had lent him the very thing, a stout canvas kit bag, sack-shaped, with holes around the neck for the brass bar and padlock. It was a bit shapeless, true, and not much to look at, but its capacity was unlimited, and there was no need to pack carefully. He shoved in his waterproof coat, his fur cap and gloves, his skates and climbing boots, his sweaters, snow boots and ear caps, and then on the top of these he piled his woolen shirts and underwear, his thick socks, puttees, whatever that is, and knickerbockers. The dress suit came next, in case the hotel people dressed for dinner, and then, thinking of the best way to pack his white shirts, he paused a moment to reflect. "That's the worst of these kit bags," he mused vaguely, standing in the center of the sitting room, where he had come to fetch some string. It was after 10 o'clock. A furious gust of wind rattled the windows as though to hurry him up. And he thought with pity of the poor Londoners whose Christmas would be spent in such a climate, whilst he was skimming over snowy slopes and bright sunshine, and dancing in the evening with rosy-cheeked girls. Ah, that reminded him he must put in his dancing pumps and evening socks. He crossed over from his sitting room to the cupboard on the landing, where he kept his linen. And as he did so, he heard someone coming softly up the stairs. He stood still a moment on the landing to listen. It was Mr. Monk's step, he thought. She must be coming up with the last post. But then the steps ceased suddenly, and he heard no more. They were at least 2 flights down, and he came to the conclusion they were too heavy to be those of his bibulous landlady. No doubt they belonged to a late lodger who had mistaken his floor. He went into his bedroom and packed his pump and dress shirts as best he could. The kit bag, by this time, was 2/3 full and stood upright on its own base like a sack of flour. For the first time he noticed that it was old and dirty, the canvas faded and worn, and that it had obviously been subjected to a rather rough treatment. It was not a very nice bag to have sent him, certainly not a new one, or one that his chief valued. He gave the matter a passing thought and went on with his packing. Once or twice, however, he caught himself wondering who it could have been wandering down below, for Mrs. Monks had not come up with the letters, and the floor was empty and unfurnished. From time to time, moreover, He was almost certain he heard the soft tread of someone padding about over the bare boards, cautiously, stealthily, as silently as possible. And further, that the sounds had been lately coming distinctly nearer. For the first time in his life, he began to feel a little creepy. Then, as though to emphasize this feeling, an odd thing happened. As he left the bedroom, having just packed his recalcitrant white shirts, he noticed that the top of the kit bag looped over towards him with an extraordinary resemblance to a human face. What the heck does this mean? Bicamus fell into a fall like a nose? Bicamus? What? Whatever. It fell into a fold like a nose and forehead, and the brass rings for the padlock just filled the position of the eyes. A shadow? Or was it a travel stain? For he could not tell exactly. Looked like hair. It gave him rather a turn, for it was so absurdly, so outrageously like the face of John the murderer. He laughed and went into the front room where the light was stronger. That horrid case has got on my mind, he thought. I shall be glad of a change of scene and air. In the sitting room, however, he was not pleased to hear again that stealthily tread upon the stairs, and to realize that it was much closer than before, as well as unmistakably real. And this time, he got up and went out to see who it could be creeping about on the upper staircase at so late an hour. But the sound ceased. There was no one visible on the stairs. He went to the floor below, not without trepidation, and turned on the electric light to make sure that no one was hiding in the empty rooms of the unoccupied suite. There was not a stick of furniture large enough to hide a dog. Then he called over the banister to Mrs. Monk's, but there was no answer, and his voice echoed down into the dark vault of the house, and was lost in the roar of the gale that howled outside. Everyone was in bed and asleep, everyone except himself and the owner of this soft and stealthy tread. My absurd imagination, I suppose, he thought. It must have been the wind after all, although it seemed so very real and close, I thought. He went back to his packing. It was by this time getting on towards midnight. He drank his coffee up and lit another pipe, the last before turning in. It is difficult to say exactly at what point fear begins, when the causes of that fear are not plainly before the eyes. Impressions gather on the surface of the mind, film by film, as ice gathers upon the surface of still water, but often so lightly that they claim no definite recognition from the consciousness. Then a point is reached where the accumulated impressions become a definite emotion, and the mind realizes that something has happened. With something of a start, Johnson suddenly recognized that he felt nervous, oddly nervous. Also, that for some time past the causes of this feeling had been gathering slowly in his mind, but that he had only just reached the point where he was forced to acknowledge them. It was a singular and curious malaise that had come over him, and he hardly knew what to make of it. He felt as though he were doing something that was strongly objected to by another person, moreover, who had some right to object. It was a most disturbing and disagreeable feeling, not unlike the persistent promptings of conscience, almost, in fact, as if he was doing something he knew to be wrong, Yet, though he searched vigorously and honestly in his mind, he could nowhere lay his finger upon the secret of this growing uneasiness, and it perplexed him. More, it distressed and frightened him. "Pure nerves, I suppose," he said aloud with a forced laugh. "Mountain air will cure all that. Ah," he added, still speaking to himself, "and that reminds me, my snow glasses." He was standing by the door of the bedroom during this brief soliloquy, and as he passed quickly towards the sitting room to fetch them from the cupboard, he saw, out of the corner of his eye, the indistinct outline of a figure standing on the stairs, a few feet from the top. It was someone in a stooping position, with one hand on the banister, and the face peering up towards the landing, and at the same moment he heard a shuffling footstep. The person who had been creeping about below all this time had at last come up to his own floor. Who in the world could it be? And what, in the name of heaven, did he want? Johnson caught his breath sharply. And stood stock still. Then, after a few seconds' hesitation, he found his courage and turned to investigate. Wait, I changed something. Better. Hi, Wormy. Soliaki. Yeah. Okay, one more time. Johnson caught his breath sharply and stood stock still. Then, after a few seconds' hesitation, he found his courage and turned to investigate. The stairs, he saw to his utter amazement, were empty. There was no one. He felt a series of cold shivers run over him, and something about the muscles of his legs gave a little and grew weak. For the space of several minutes he peered steadily into the shadows that congregated about the top of the staircase, where he had seen the figure. And then he walked fast, almost ran in fact, into the light of the front room. But hardly had he passed inside the doorway when he heard someone come up the stairs behind him with a quick bound and go swiftly into his bedroom. It was a heavy, but at the same time a stealthy footstep, the tread of somebody who did not wish to be seen. And it was at this precise moment that the nervousness he had hitherto experienced leaped the boundary line and entered the state of fear, almost of acute, unreasoning fear. Before it turned into terror, there was a further boundary to cross, and beyond that again led the region of pure horror. Johnson's position was an unenviable one. By Jove, that was someone on the stairs, then, he muttered, his flesh crawling all over. And whoever it was has now gone into my bedroom. His delicate, pale face turned absolutely white, and for some minutes he hardly knew what to think or do. Then, he realized intuitively that delay only set a premium upon fear, and he crossed the landing boldly and went straight into the other room where, a few seconds before, the steps had disappeared. "Who's there? Is that you, Mrs. Monks?" he called aloud as he went, and heard the first half of his words echo down the empty stairs. "Oh my goodness. Hi everyone. Thank you so much for the read. Welcome in, guys. Hello." And he abandoned you. Oh no. Abandoned on Christmas. My. Here for story time? Yeah, let's go. Welcome in, everyone. It's so good to see you. Thank you so much for the raid. I really appreciate it. I hope you had a pleasant stream. I hope you had a great time. I've heard of Tormented Souls, but I haven't had a chance to take a look at it myself. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Really appreciate it. I know it's Christmas Eve, so if you guys have to raid and run, I 100% understand. I wanted to be able to do something for my froggets on Christmas Eve, which is why this, I don't know, spooky-ish reading time felt appropriate. So if you guys want to just kick back and relax, or you have stuff to do, family to entertain, please, no worries, enjoy your Christmas Eve to the fullest. Thank you so much, Tony, for gifting us up to Empress. I really appreciate it. Check it out when I can. Hell yeah, I definitely will. We are reading The Kid Bag by Algernon Blackwood. I wanted to go for some spooky stories on Christmas Eve. I like spooky stories in general. I feel like they're the most entertaining to read. So yeah. I hope you guys enjoy. I'll get back to reading, so I won't be able to interact with the chat too much. But nonetheless, thank you so much. Once again, Empress, Merry Christmas to everyone. Merry Christmas. Okay, let's get back to the story. Who's there? Is that you, Mrs. Monks? He called aloud as he went and heard the first half of his words echo down the empty stairs, while the second half fell dead against the curtains in a room that apparently held no other human figure than his own. Who's there? He called again in a voice unnecessarily loud and that only just held firm. What do you want here? The curtain swayed very lightly, and as he saw it, his heart felt as if it almost missed a beat. Yet he dashed forward and drew them aside with a rush. A window, streaming with rain, was all that met his gaze. He continued his search, but in vain. The cupboards held nothing but rows of clothes, hanging motionless, and under the bed there was no sign of anyone hiding. He stepped backwards into the middle of the room, and as he did so, something all but tripped him up. Turning with a sudden spring of alarm, he saw the kid bag. Odd, he thought. That's not where I left it. A few moments before, it had surely been on his right, between the bed and the bath. He did not remember having moved it. He was very curious. What in the world was the matter with everything? Were all his senses gone queer? A terrific gust of wind tore at the windows, dashing the sleet against the glass with the force of a small gunshot, and then fled away, howling dismally over the waste of Bloomberry roofs. A sudden vision of the channel next day rose in his mind and recalled him sharply to realities. There's no one here at any rate, that's quite clear, he exclaimed aloud. Yet, at the time he uttered them, he knew perfectly well that his words were not true, and that he did not believe them himself. He felt exactly as though someone was hiding close about him, watching all his movements, trying to hinder his packing in some way. And two of my senses, he added, keeping up the pretense, having played me the most absurd tricks. The steps I heard and the figure I saw were both entirely imaginary. He went to hack to the front room, poked the fire into a blaze, and sat down before it to think. What impressed him more than anything else was the fact that the kid bag was no longer where he had left it. It had been dragged nearer to the door. What happened afterwards that night happened, of course, to a man already excited by fear, and was perceived by a mind that had not the full and proper control, therefore, of the senses. Outwardly, Johnson remained calm and master of himself to the end, pretending to the very last that everything he witnessed had a natural explanation or was merely delusions of his tired nerves. But inwardly, in his very heart, he knew all along that someone had been hiding downstairs in the empty suit when he came in, that this person had watched his opportunity and then stealthily made his way up to the bedroom, and that all he saw and heard afterwards, from the moving of the kid back to, well, to the other things the story has to tell, were caused directly by the presence of this invisible person. And it were here, just when he most desired to keep his mind and thoughts controlled, that the vivid pictures received day after day upon the mental plates exposed in the courtroom of the Old Bailey came strongly to light and developed themselves in the dark room of his inner vision. Unpleasant, haunting memories have a way of coming to life again just when the mind least desires them. In the silent watches of the night, on the sleepless pillows, during the lonely hours spent by sick and dying beds. And so now, in the same way, Johnson saw nothing but the dreadful face of John, the murderer, lowering at him from every corner of his mental field of vision. The white skin, the evil eyes, and the fringe of black hair low over the forehead. All the pictures of those 10 days in court crowded back into his mind, unbidden and very vivid. "This is all rubbish and nerves," he exclaimed at length, springing with sudden energy from his chair. "I shall finish my packing and go to bed. I'm overwrought, overtired. No doubt, at this rate, I shall hear steps and things all night." But his face was deadly white all the same. He snatched up his field glasses and walked across to the bedroom, humming a music hall song as he went. A trifle too loud to be natural, and the instant he crossed the threshold and stood within the room, something turned cold about his heart, and he felt that every hair on his head stood up. The kit bag lay close in front of him, several feet nearer to the door than he had left it, and just over its crumpled top, he saw a head and face slowly sinking down, out of sight, as though someone were crouching behind it to hide. And at the same moment, a sound like a long-drawn sigh was distinctly audible in the still air about him, between the gusts of the storm outside. Johnson had more courage and willpower than the girlish indecision of his face indicated. But at first, such a wave of terror came over him that for some seconds he could not do anything but stand and stare. A violent trembling ran down his back and legs, and he was conscious of a foolish, almost a hysterical impulse to scream aloud. That sigh seemed in his very ear, and the air still quivered with it. It was unmistakably a human sigh. Who's there?" he said at length, finding his voice. But though he meant to speak with loud decision, the tones came out instead in a faint whisper, for he had partly lost the control of his tongue and lips. He stepped forward so that he could see all around and over the kit bag. Of course, there was nothing there. nothing but the faded carpet and the bulging canvas sides. He put out his hands and threw open the mouth of the sack where it had fallen over, being only 3 parts full, and then he saw for the first time that round the inside, some 6 inches from the top, there ran a broad smear of dull crimson. It was an old and faded bloodstain. He uttered a scream and drew back his hands as if they had been burned. At the same moment, the kidback gave a faint but unmistakable lurch forward towards the door. Jonathan collapsed backwards, searching with his hands for the support of something solid, and the door, being further behind him than he realized, received his weight just in time to prevent his falling, and shot to with a resounding bang. At the same moment, the swinging of his left arm accidentally touched the electric switch, and the light in the room went out. It was an awkward and disagreeable predicament, and if Johnson had not been possessed of real pluck, he might have done all manner of foolish things. As it was, however, he pulled himself together and groped furiously for the little brass knob to turn the light on again. But a rapid closing of the door had set the coats hanging on it a swinging, and his fingers became entangled in a confusion of sleeves and pockets, so that it was some moments before he found the switch. And in those few moments of bewilderment and terror, 2 things happened that sent him beyond recall over the boundary into the region of genuine horror. He distinctly heard the kidback shuffling heavily across the floor in jerks, and close in front of his face sounded once again the sigh of a human being. In his anguished efforts to find the brass button, on the wall he nearly scraped the nails from his fingers. But even then, in those frenzied moments of alarm, so swift and alert are the impressions of a man's keyed mind, keyed up by a vivid emotion, he had time to realize that he dreaded the return of the light, that it might be better for him to stay hidden in the merciful screen of darkness. It was but the impulse of a moment, however, and before he had time to act upon it, he had yielded automatically to the original desire, and the room was flooded again with light. But the second instinct had been right. It would have been better for him to have stayed in the shelter of the kind darkness, for there, close before him, bending over the half-packed kidback, clear as life in the merciless glare of the electric light, stood the figure of John, the murderer. Not 3 feet from him the man stood, a fringe of black hair marked plainly against the pallor of the forehead, the whole horrible presence of the scoundrel, as vivid as he had seen him day after day in the Old Bailey, when he stood there in the dock, cynical and callous, under the very shadow of the gallows. In a flash, Johnson realized what it all meant. The dirty and much-used bag, the smear of crimson within the top, the dreadful stretched condition of the bulging sides. He remembered how the victim's body had been stuffed inside a canvas bag for burial. The ghastly, dismembered fragments forced with lime into this very bag, and the bag itself produced as evidence. It all came back to him as clear as day. Very softly and stealthily, his hand groped behind him for the handle of the door, but before he could actually turn it, the very thing that he most of all dreaded came about, and John lifted his devil's face and looked at him. At the same moment, that heavy sigh passed through the air of the room, formulated somehow into words. "It's my bag, and I want it." Johnson just remembered clawing the door open and then falling in a heap upon the floor of the landing as he tried frantically to make his way into the front room. He remained unconscious for a long time, and it was still dark when he opened his eyes and realized that he was lying, stiff and bruised, on the cold boards. And the memory of what he had seen rushed back into his mind, and he promptly fainted again. When he woke the second time, the wintry dawn was just beginning to peep in at the windows, painting the stairs a cheerless, dismal grey, and he managed to crawl into the front room and covers himself with the overcoat in the armchair, where at length he fell asleep. A great clamor woke him. He recognized Mrs. Monk's voice, loud and voluble. "What? You ain't been to bed, sir? Are you ill? Or has anything happened? And there's an urgent gentleman to see you, though it ain't 7 o'clock yet. And... Who is it?" he stammered. "I'm all right, thanks. Fell asleep in my chair, I suppose. Someone from Mr. Wilbrim's, and he says he ought to see you quick, before you go abroad." "Show him up, please, at once," said Johnson, whose head was whirling and his mind was still full of dreadful visions. Mr. Wilbraham's man came in with many apologies and explained briefly and quickly that an absurd mistake had been made and that the wrong kit bag had been sent over the night before. Henry somehow got hold of the one that came over from the courtroom, and Mr. Wilbraham only discovered it when he saw his own lying in his room and asked why it had not gone to you. "Ah," said Johnson stupidly. "And he must have brought you to the one from the murder case instead, sir, I'm afraid," the man continued, without the ghost of an expression on his face. "The one John packed the dead both in. Mr. Wilbraham's awful upset about it, sir, and told me to come over first thing this morning with the right one, as you were leaving by the boat." He pointed to a clean-looking kit bag on the floor, which he had just brought, "and I was to bring the other one back, sir." For some minutes, John could not find his voice. At last, he pointed in the direction of his bedroom. "Perhaps you would kindly unpack it for me. Just empty the things out on the floor." The man disappeared into the other room and was gone for 5 minutes. Johnson heard the shifting to and fro of the bag and the rattle of the skates and boots being unpacked. "Thank you, sir," the man said, returning with the bag folded over his arm. "And can I do anything more to help you, sir?" "What is it?" asked Johnson, seeing that he still had something he wished to say. The man shuffled and looked mysterious. "Beg pardon, sir, but knowing your interest in the case, I thought you might like to know what's happened." "Yes. John killed himself last night with poison immediately on getting his release, and he left a note for Mr. Wilbraham, saying as he'd be much obliged if they'd have him put away, same as the woman he murdered, in the old kit bag." What time did he do it?" asked Johnson. 10 o'clock last night, sir," the warden said.
Wow, that was so good. What the heck, I got goosebumps. Now that's a good ghost story, if I do say so myself.
Ah, that was good. Very good, very good. I like this one much more. I knew that this author does a much better job of, well, much better. It's simply like a different style from the one before, but yeah, I liked that a lot. It was really good. It was really good. I hope you guys liked it. I hope I did a good enough job of making it appropriately spooky. I got a little bit lightheaded because because I'm trying to do this like soft breathy voice, and I'm not actually breathing, I guess. I'm not getting enough oxygen, so I'm getting lightheaded a bit. Lightheaded. Hey, Arsern, good to see you. Wow, what can't you? What happened? What's wrong? Breathing is preferred, yes. Yes, indeed. Aw, Steam doesn't work? That's strange. Maybe it's overloaded? It's fine. Will make me the next ghost, yeah. Merry Christmas, Akabeko. Merry Christmas Eve. Or Merry Christmas. I don't know if you guys say it on the Eve. Usually over here we say it on the 25th. But yeah, Merry Christmas. Good to see you. Well, maybe the next ghost, yeah. Yes, it is a Hades fireplace. Do you like it? I'm honestly very much in love with what I did to the whole thing. Maybe you guys can notice, like, this is normal Mido, and this is Mido with, like, I finally started using a software that a lot of VTubers use, and look, wow, it's so what is the word? It's so cool, so cool. Thank you for the head pat. Thank you. No, it's just that that we don't have a background. But doesn't this look so pretty? Doesn't it look so pretty? Not just because of the background, but like the color of my model and everything, the backlight is so cool. I'm loving it. My room, yeah, my room, my fireplace in my room, yeah. Yes. Okay, let me see if I can find another short one for us to go through. Before I go eep. Well, go eep. I have a few things to take care of. That's why I'm finishing earlier. Let's see what I can find. It's not a thing in VTube Studio, no, I'm using a different software, yeah. It's like, I'm not the rage. Don't you see that it's also snowing? I don't have a roof. I only have the fireplace. I'm like, do you know those video game ads where they're showing like a woman and a child who's freezing, and you have like a choice to fix something, in that room, and it's either like board up the window or turn on the fireplace or stuff like that so they won't freeze. This is what's happening right now. It's not dandruff. Yeah, those type of ads, yeah. I can also make it rain if I want to, but I think snow is more appropriate. It was snowing there? Oh, that's so cool. Over here it's only raining. It's only raining and, well, sorry, at the same time I'm trying to find a new story. It's only raining and the wind is howling. No chance of snow, sadly, no. I don't think we're gonna get below 0 degrees. Let me see. Well, at night, yeah. Oh, at night we're gonna have like -3-ish. They're saying snow, but it's not snowing. Huh, they're lying. It's not actually snowing. No, it's not cold enough. I think maybe January might have a chance of snow here, but other than that, not a lot of luck. Let me see what else I can read for you guys. Okay. I think I have something. Also from Algernon Blackwood. One second. Has it ever rained? Snowed there, Mystic? I feel like you guys are a warm enough country to never get snow. This is annoying. I have to scroll for 10 years. Okay, found it. 1954. Wow. I should not take you seriously. This story is called The Glamour of the Snow, also by Algernon Blackwood. Hibbert, always conscious of two worlds, was in his mountain village conscious of three. It lay on the slopes of the Valais Alps, and he had taken a room in the little post office where he could be at peace to write his book, yet at the same time enjoy the winter sports and find companionship in the hotels when he wanted it. The three worlds that met and mingled here seemed to his imaginative temperament very obvious, though it is doubtful if another mind less intuitively equipped would have seen them so well defined. There was the world of tourist English, civilized, quasi-educated, to which he belonged by birth, at any rate. There was the world of peasants, to which he felt himself drawn by sympathy, for he loved and admired their toiling, simple life. And then there was this other, which he could only call the world of nature. To this last, however, in virtue of a vehement poetic imagination and a tumultuous pagan instinct fed by his very blood, he felt that most of him belonged. The others borrowed from it, as it were, for visits. Here, with the soul of nature, hid his central life. Between all three was conflict, potential conflict. On the skating rink each Sunday, the tourists regarded the natives as intruders. In the church, the peasants plainly questioned, "Why do you come? We are here to worship, you to stare and whisper." For neither of these two worlds accepted the other, and neither did nature accept the tourists, for it took advantage of their least mistakes, and indeed, even of the peasant world accepted only those who were strong and bold enough to invade her savage domain with sufficient skill to protect themselves from several forms of death. Now, Hibbert was keenly aware of this potential conflict and want of harmony. He felt outside, yet caught by it, torn in the three directions because he was partly of each world, but wholly in only one. There grew in him a constant, subtle effort, or at least desire, to unify them and decide positively to which he should belong and live in. The attempt, of course, was largely subconscious. It was the natural instinct of a richly imaginative nature, seeking the point of equilibrium so that the mind could feel at peace and his brain be free to do good work. Among the guests, no one especially claimed his interest. The men were nice but undistinguished, athletic schoolmates, doctors snatching a holiday, good fellows all. The women, equally various, the clever, the would-be fast, the dare to be dull, the women who understood, and the usual pack of jolly dancing girls and flappers. And Hibbert, with his 40-odd years of thick experience behind him, got on well with the lot. He understood them all. They belonged to definite, predigested types that are the same the world over, and that he had met the world over long ago. But to none of them did he belong. His nature was too multiple to subscribe to the set of shibboleths of any one class, and since all liked him and felt that somehow since he seemed outside of them, spectator looker on, all sought to claim him. In a sense, therefore, the three worlds fought for him: natives, tourists, nature. It was thus began the singular conflict for the soul of Hibbert. In his own soul, however, it took place. Neither the peasants nor the tourists were conscious that they fought for anything, and nature, they say, is merely blind and automatic. The assault upon him of the peasants may be left out of account, for it is obvious that they stood no chance of success. The tourists would, however, made a gallant effort to subdue him to themselves, but the evenings in the hotel, when dancing was not in order, were English. The provincial imagination was set upon a throne and worshipped heavily through incense of the stupidest conventions possible. Himmer used to go back early to his room in the post office to work. It is a mistake on my part to have realized that there is any conflict at all, he thought, as he crunched home over the snow at midnight after one of the dances. It would have been better to have kept outside it all and done my work. Better, he added, looking back down the silent village street to the church tower. And safer. The adjective slipped from his mind before he was aware of it. He turned with an involuntary start and looked about him. He knew perfectly well what it meant. This thought that had thrust its head up from the instinctive region. He understood, without being able to express it fully, the meaning that betrayed itself in the choice of the adjective. For if he had ignored the existence of this conflict, he would at the same time have remained outside the arena, whereas now he had entered the lists. Now this battle for his soul must have issue, and he knew that the spell of nature was greater for him than all other spells in the world combined, greater than love, revelry, pleasure, greater even than study. He had always been afraid to let himself go. His pagan soul dreaded her terrific powers of witchery even while he worshipped. The little village already slept. The world lay smothered in snow. The chalet roofs shone with white beneath the moon, and pitch-black shadows gathered against the walls of the church. His eye rested a moment on the square stone tower with its frosted cross that pointed to the sky. Then traveled with a leap of many thousand feet to the enormous mountains that brushed the brilliant stars. Like a forest rose the huge peaks above. Like a forest rose, I read that weird. Like a forest rose the huge peaks above the slumbering village, measuring the night and heavens. They beckoned him, and something born of the snowy desolation, born of the midnight and the silent grandeur, born of the great listening hollows of the night, something that laid twixt terror and wonder, dropped from the vast wintry spaces down into his heart and called him. Very softly, unrecorded in any word or thought his brain could cut past, it laid its spell upon him. Fingers of snow brushed the surface of his heart. The power and quiet majesty of the winter's night appalled him. Fumbling a moment with the big unwieldy key, he let himself in and went upstairs to bed. Two thoughts went with him, apparently quite ordinary and sensible ones. What fools these peasants are to sleep through such a night. And the other? Those dances tire me. I'll never go again. My work only suffers in the morning. The claims of peasants and tourists upon him seemed thus, in a single instant, weakened. The clash of battle troubled half his dreams. Nature had sent her beauty of the night and won the first assault. The others, routed and dismayed, fled far away. Don't go back to your dreary old post office. We're going to have supper in my room. Something hot. Come and join us. Hurry up. There had been an ice carnival, and the last party, tailing up the snow slope to the hotel, called him. The Chinese lanterns smoked and sputtered on the wires. The band had long since gone. The cold was bitter, and the moon came only momentarily between high, driving clouds. From the shed, where the people changed from skates to snow boots, he shouted something to the effect that he was following. But no answer came. The moving shadows of those who had called were already merged high up against the village darkness. The voices died away. Doors slammed. Hibbert found himself alone on the deserted rink. And it was then, quite suddenly, the impulse came to stay and skate alone. The thought of the stuffy hotel room and of those noisy people with their obvious jokes and laughter oppressed him. He felt a longing to be alone with the night, to taste her wonder all by himself, there beneath the stars, gliding over the ice. It was not yet midnight, and he could skate for half an hour. That supper party, if they noticed his absence at all, would merely think he had changed his mind and gone to bed. It was an impulse, yes, and not an unnatural one. Yet even at the time it struck him that something more than impulse lay concealed behind it. More than invitation, yet certainly less than command. There was a vague, queer feeling that he stayed because he had to. Almost as though there was something he had forgotten, overlooked, left undone. Imaginative temperaments are often thus, and impulse is ever weakened, for with such ill-considered opening of the doors to hasty action may come an invasion of other forces at the same time, forces merely waiting their opportunity perhaps. He caught the fugitive warning even while he dismissed it as absurd, and the next minute he was whirling over the smooth ice in delightful curves and loops beneath the moon. There was no fear of collision. He could take his own speed and space as he willed. The shadows of the towering mountains fell across the ring, and the wind of ice came from the forests where the snow lay 10 feet deep. The hotel lights winked and went out. The village slept. The high wire netting could not keep out the wonder of the winter night that grew about him like a presence. He skated on and on, keen, exhilarating pleasure in his tingling blood, and merriness all forgotten. And then, midway in the delight of rushing movement, he saw a figure gliding behind the wire netting, watching him. With a start that almost made him lose his balance, for the abruptness of the new arrival was so unlooked for, he paused and stared. Although the light was dim, he made out that it was the figure of a woman, and that she was feeling her way along the netting, trying to get in. Against the white background of the snowfield, he watched her rather stealthy efforts as she passed with a silent step over the banked-up snow. She was tall and slim and graceful. He could see that even in the dark. And then, of course, he understood. It was another adventurous skater like himself, stolen down unawares from a hotel or chalet, and searching for the opening. At once, making a sign and pointing with one hand, he turned swiftly and skated over to the little entrance on the other side. But even before he got there was a sound on the ice behind him, and, with an exclamation of amazement he could not suppress, he turned to see her swerving up to his side across the width of the ring. She had somehow found another way in. Hibbert, as a rule, was punctilious, and in these free and easy places perhaps especially so. If only for his own protection, he did not seek to make advances, unless some kind of introduction paved the way. But for these two to skate together in the semi-darkness without speech, often of necessity brushing shoulders almost, was too absurd to think of. Accordingly, he raised his cap and spoke. His actual words he seems unable to recall, nor what the girl said in reply, except that she answered him in accented English with some commonplace about doing figures at midnight on an empty rink. Quite natural it was, and right. She wore grey clothes of some kind, though not the customary long gloves or sweater, for indeed her hands were bare, and presently when he skated with her, he wondered with something like astonishment at their dry and icy coldness. And she was delicious to skate with, supple, sure, and light, fast as a man, yet with the freedom of a child, sinuous and steady at the same time. Her flexibility made him wonder, and when he asked where she had learned, she murmured. He caught the breath against his ear and recalled later that it was singularly cold, that she could hardly tell, for she had been accustomed to the ice ever since she could remember. But her face he never properly saw. A muffler of white fur buried her neck to the ears, and her cap came over the eyes. He only saw that she was young. Or could he gather her hotel or chalet? For she pointed vaguely when he asked her up the slopes. Just over there, she said, quickly taking his hand again. He did not press her. No doubt she wished to hide her escapade, and the touch of her hand thrilled him more than anything he could remember. Even through his thick glove, he felt the softness of that cold and delicate softness. The softness of that cold and delicate softness. Wow. The clouds thickened over the mountains. It grew darker. They talked very little, and did not always skate together. Often they separated, curving about in corners by themselves, but always coming together again in the center of the rink. And when she left him thus, Hibbert was conscious of, yes, of missing her. He found a peculiar satisfaction, almost a fascination, in skating by her side. It was quite an adventure, these two strangers with the ice and snow and night. Midnight had long since sounded from the old church tower before they parted. She gave the sign and skated quickly to the shed, meaning to find a seat and help her take her skates off. Yet when he turned, she had already gone. He saw her slim figure gliding away across the snow, and hurrying for the last time around the rink alone, he searched in vain for the opening she had twice used in this curious way. How very queer, he thought, referring to the wire netting. She must have lifted it and wriggled under. Wondering how in the world she managed it, what in the world had possessed him to be so free with her, and who in the world she was, he went up the steep slope to the post office and so to bed, her promise to come again another night still ringing delightfully in his ears. And curious were the thoughts and sensations that accompanied him. Most of all, perhaps, was the half-suggestion of some dim memory that he had known this girl before, had met her somewhere, more, that she knew him. For in her voice, a low, soft, windy little voice it was, tender and soothing for all its quiet coldness. There lay some faint reminder of two others he had known, both long since gone. The voice of the woman he had loved, and the voice of his mother. But this time, through his dreams, there ran no clash of battle. He was conscious, rather, of something cold and clinging that made him think of sifting snowflakes climbing slowly with entangling touch, then thickness round his feet. The snow coming without noise, each flake so light and tiny, none can mark the spot whereon it settles, yet the mass of it able to smother whole villages, wove through the very texture of his mind, cold, bewildering, deadening for effort, with its clinging network of 10 million feathery touches. In the morning, Hibbert realized he had done perhaps a foolish thing. The brilliant sunshine that drenched the valley made him see this, and the sight of his work table with its typewriter, books, papers, and the rest brought additional conviction. To have skated with a girl alone at midnight, no matter how innocently the thing had come about, was unwise, unfair, especially to her. Gossip in these little winter resorts was worse than in a provincial town. He hoped no one had seen them. Luckily, the night had been dark. Most likely none had heard the ring of skates. Deciding that in future he would be more careful, he plunged into work and sought to dismiss the matter from his mind. But in his times of leisure, the memory returned persistently to haunt him. When he skied, lodged, or danced in the evenings, and especially when he skated on the little ring, he was aware that the eyes of his mind forever sought this strange companion of the night. 100 times he fancied that he saw her, but always sight deceived him. Her face he might not know, but he could hardly fail to recognize her figure. Yet nowhere among the others did he catch a glimpse of that slim young creature he had skated with alone beneath the clouded stars. He searched in vain. Even his inquiries as to the occupants of the private chalets brought no result. He had lost her. But the queer thing was that he felt as though she was somewhere close. He knew she had not really gone. While people came and left with every day, it never once occurred to him that she had left. On the contrary, he felt assured that they would meet again. This thought he never quite acknowledged. Perhaps it was the wish that fathered it only. And, even when he did meet her, it was a question how he would speak and claim acquaintance, or whether she would recognize himself. It might be awkward. He almost came to dread a meeting, though dread, of course, was far too strong a word to describe an emotion that was half delight, half wondering anticipation. Meanwhile, the season was in full swing. Iber felt in perfect health, worked hard, skied, skated, lodged, I have no idea what that means, lodged, and at night danced fairly often, in spite of his decision. This dancing was, however, an act of subconscious surrender. It really meant he hoped to find her among the whirling couples. He was searching for her without quite acknowledging it to himself, and the hotel world, meanwhile, thinking it had won him over, teased and chaffed him. He made excuses in a similar vein, but all the time, he watched and searched and waited. For several days, the sky held clear and bright and frosty, bitterly cold, everything crisp and sparkling in the sun, but there was no sign of fresh snow, and the skiers began to grumble. On the mountains was an icy crust that made running dangerous. They wanted the frozen, dry, and powdery snow that makes for speed, renders steering easier, and falling less severe. But the keen east wind showed no signs of changing for a whole 10 days. Then, suddenly, there came a touch of softer air, and the weatherwise began to prophesy. Hibbert, who was delicately sensitive to the least change in the earth or sky, was perhaps the first to feel it. Only he did not prophesy. He knew through every nerve in his body that moisture had crept into the air, was accumulating, and that presently a fall would come, for he responded to the moods of nature like a fine parameter. And the knowledge this time brought into his heart a strange little wayward emotion that was hard to account for. A feeling of unexplained uneasiness and disquieting joy. For behind it, woven through it rather, ran a faint exhilaration that connected remotely somewhere with that touch of delicious alarm, that tiny anticipating dread that so puzzled him when he thought of his next meeting with the skating companion of the night. It lay beyond all words, all telling, this queer relationship between the two, but somehow the girl in snow ran in a pair across his mind. Perhaps for imaginative writing men, more than other workers, the smallest change of mood betrays itself at once. His work, at any rate, revealed this slightly shifting of emotional values in his soul. Not that his writing suffered, but that it altered, subtly, as those changes of sky or sea or landscape that come with the passing of afternoon into evening, imperceptibly. A subconscious excitement sought to push outwards and express itself, and, knowing the uneven effect such moods produced in his work, he laid his pen aside and took instead of reading that he had to do. Meanwhile, the brilliance passed from the sunshine, the sky grew slowly overcast. By dusk, the mountain tops came singularly close and sharp. The distant valley rose into absurdly near perspective. The moisture increased rapidly, approaching saturation point, when it must fall in snow. Eber watched and waited. And in the morning, the world did smother beneath its fresh, white carpet. It snowed heavily till noon, thickly, incessantly, chokingly, a foot or more. Then the sky cleared. The sun came out in splendor. The wind shifted back to the east, and frost came down upon the mountains with its keenest and most biting tooth. The drop in the temperature was tremendous, but the skiers were jubilant. Next day, the running would be fast and perfect. Already the mass was settling, and the surface freezing into these moss-like powdery crystals that made the ski run almost on their own accord with a faint sishing as of a bird's wings through the air. That night, there was excitement in the little hotel world. First because there was a ball costume, I guess. But chiefly because the new snow had come, and Hibbert felt drawn to go. He did not go in costume, but he wanted to talk about the slopes and the skiing with the other men, and at the same time, there was the truth, the deeper necessity that called, for the singular connection between the stranger and the snow again betrayed itself, utterly beyond explanation as before, but vital and insistent. Some hidden instinct in his pagan soul, heaven knows how he phrased it even to himself, if he phrased it at all, whispered that with the snow, the girl would be somewhere about, would emerge from her hiding place, would even look for him. Absolutely unwarranted it was. He laughed while he stood before the little glass and trimmed his mustache, tried to make his black tie sit straight, and shook down his dinner jacket so that it should lie upon the shoulders without a crease. His brown eyes were very bright. I look younger than I usually do, he thought. It was unusual, even significant, in a man who had no vanity about his appearance and certainly never questioned his age or tried to look younger than he was. Affairs of the heart, with one tumultuous exception that left no fuel for lesser subsequent fires, had never troubled him. The forces of his soul and mind not called upon for work and obvious duties all went to nature. The desolate, wild places of the earth were what he loved, night and the beauty of the stars and snow, and this evening he felt their glaze upon him mightily stirring. A rising wildness caught his blood, quickening his pulse, woke longing and passion too. but chiefly snow. The snow whirred softly through his thoughts like white, seductive dreams. For the snow had come, and she, it seemed, had somehow come with it into his mind. And yet he stood before that twisted mirror and pulled his tie and coat askew 1,000 times as though it mattered. What in the world is up with me? He thought. Then, laughing a little, he turned before leaving the room to put his private papers in order. The green Morocco desk that held them he took down from the shelf and laid upon the table. Tied to the lid was the visiting card with his brother's London address in case of accident. On the way down to the hotel, he wondered why he had done this, for though imaginative, he was not the kind of man who dealt in presentiments. Moods with him were strong, but ever held in leash. It's almost like a warning, he thought, smiling. He drew his thick coat tightly around the throat as the freezing air bit at him. Those warnings one reads of in stories somewhere. A delicious happiness was in his blood. Over the edge of the hills across the valley rose the moon. He saw her silver sheet, the world of snow. Snow covered all. It smothered sound and distance. It smothered houses, streets, and human beings. It smothered life. In the hall there was light and bustle. People were already arriving from the other hotels and chalets, their costumes hidden beneath many wraps. Groups of men in evening dress stood about smoking, talking snow and skiing. The band was tuning up. The claims of the hotel world clashed about him faintly, as of old. At the big glass windows of the veranda, peasants stopped a moment on their way home from the cafe to peer. Hibbert thought laughably of that conflict he used to imagine. He laughed because it suddenly seemed so unreal. He belonged so utterly to nature that the mountains, and especially to those desolate slopes where now the snow lay thick and fresh and sweet, that there was no question of a conflict at all. The power of the newly fallen snow had caught him, proving it without effort. Out there, upon those lonely reaches of the moonlit ridges, the snow lay ready, masses and masses of it, cool, soft, inviting. He longed for it. It awaited him. He thought of the intoxicating delight of skiing in the moonlight. Thus, somehow, in vivid flashing vision, he thought of it while he stood there smoking with the other men and talking all the shop of skiing. And ever mysteriously blended with this power of the snow, poured also thought through his inner being the power of the girl. He could not disabuse his mind of the insinuating presence of the two together. He remembered that queer skating impulse of 10 days ago, the impulse that had let her in, that any mind, even an imaginative one, could pass beneath the sway of such a fancy was strange enough. And Hibbert, while fully aware of the disorder, yet found a curious joy in yielding to it. This insubordinate center that drew him towards old pagan beliefs had assumed command. With a kind of sensuous pleasure, he let himself be conquered. And the snow that night seemed in everybody's thoughts. The dancing couples talked of it. The hotel proprietors congratulated one another. It meant good sport and satisfied their guests. Everyone was planning trips and expeditions. Expeditions. Talking of slopes and telemarks, of flying speed and distance, of drifts and crust and frost. Vitality and enthusiasm pulsed in the very air. All were alert and active, positive, radiant in currents of creating life, even in the stuffy atmosphere of that crowded ballroom. And the snow had caused it. The snow had brought it. All this discharge of eager sparkling energy was due primarily to the snow. But in the mind of Hibbert, by some swift alchemy of his pagan yearnings, this energy became transmuted. It rarefied itself, gleaming in white and crystal currents of passionate anticipation, which he transferred, as by a species of electrical imagination, into the personality of the girl of the snow. She, Summer, was waiting for him, expecting him, calling to him softly from those leagues of moonlit mountain. He remembered the touch of that cool, dry hand, the soft and icy breath against his cheek, the hush and softness of her presence is the way she came and the way she had gone again, like a flurry of snow, the wind sent gliding up the slopes. She, like himself, belonged out there. He fancied that he heard her little windy voice come sifting to him through the snowy branches of the trees, calling his name, that haunting little voice that dived straight to the center of his life as once, long years ago, two other voices used to do. But nowhere among the costume dancer did he see her slender figure. He danced with one and all, distrait and absent, the stupid partner as each girl discovered, his eyes ever turning towards the door and windows, hoping to catch the luring face, the vision that did not come, and at length hoping to even against hope. For the ballroom thinned, groups left one by one, going home to their hotels and chalets. The band tired obviously. People sat drinking lemon squashes at the little tables, the men mopping their foreheads, everybody ready for bed. It was close on midnight. As Hibbert passed through the hall to get his overcoat and snowy boots, he saw men in the passage by the sport room, racing their ski against the early start. Knapsack luncheons were being ordered by the kitchen swing doors. He sighed. Lighting a cigarette a friend offered him, he returned a confused reply to some question as to whether he could join their party in the morning. It seemed he did not hear it properly. He passed through the outer vestibule between the double-glass doors and went into the night. The man who asked the question watched him go, an expression of anxiety momentarily in his eyes. "Don't think he heard you," said another, laughing. "You've got to shout to Hibbert. His mind's so full of his work." "He works too hard," suggested the first, "full of queer ideas and dreams." But Hibbert's silence was not rudeness. He had not caught the invitation, that was all. The call of the hotel world had faded. He no longer heard it. Another wilder call was sounding in his ears. For up the streets, he had seen a little figure moving. Close against the shadows of the baker's shop, it glided, white, slim, enticing. And at once, into his mind passed the hush of softness of the snow, yet with it a searching, crying wildness for the heights. He knew by some incalculable, swift instinct she would not meet him in the village street. It was not there, amid crowded houses, she would speak to him. Indeed, already she had disappeared, melted from view up the white vista of the moonlit road. Yonder, he divined, she waited there. The highway narrowed abruptly into the mountain path beyond the chalets. It did not even occur to him to hesitate. Mad though it seemed, and was, this sudden craving for the heights with her, at least for open spaces where the snow lay thick and fresh, it was too imperious to be denied. He does not remember going up to his room, putting the sweater over his evening clothes, and getting into the fur gauntlet gloves and the helmet cap of wool. Most certainly, he has no recollection of fastening on his ski. He must have done it automatically. Some faculty of normal observation was in abeyance, as it were. His mind was out beyond the village, out with the snowy mountains and the moon. There's a French name here, and there's some French, oh my god. Henri Defago. Defago. Henri Defago, putting up the shutters over his cafe windows, saw him pass and wondered mildly.
I'm gonna try this.
Un monsieur qui fait du ski à cette heure. Il est anglais. I tried. A gentleman who's trying to ski at this hour. He's English for sure, or something like that, I guess. Oh my god. He shrugged his shoulders, as though a man had the right to choose his own way of death. And Marthe Perotti, the hunchback wife at the shoemaker, looked by chance from her window, caught his figure moving swiftly up the road. She had other thoughts, for she knew and believed the old traditions of the witches and snow beings that steals the souls of men. She had even heard 'twas said the dreaded synagogue passed roaring down the street at night, and now, as then, she hid her eyes. They've called to him, and he must go, she murmured, making the sign of the cross. But no one sought to stop him. Hebert recalls only a single incident until he found himself beyond the houses, searching for her along the fringe of forest, where the moonlight met the snow in a bewildering frieze of fantastic shadows. And the incident was simply this, that he remembered passing the church. Catching the outline of its tower against the stars, he was aware of a faint sense of hesitation. A vague uneasiness came and went, jarred unpleasantly across the flow of his excited feelings, chilling exhilaration. He caught the instant's discord, dismissed it, and passed on. The seduction of the snow smothered the hint before he realized that it had brushed the skirts of warning. And then he saw her. She stood there waiting in a little clear space of shining snow, dressed all in white, part of the moonlight and the glistening background, her slender figure just discernible. I waited, for I knew you would come. The silvery little voice of windy beauty floated down to him. You had to come. I'm ready, he answered. I knew it too. The world of nature caught him to its heart in those few words. The wonder and the glory of the night and snow. Life leaped within him. The passion of his pagan soul exulted, rose in joy, flowed out to her. He neither reflected nor considered, but let himself go like the veriest schoolboy in the wilderness of first love. Give me your hand, he cried. I'm coming. A little further on, a little higher, came her delicious answer. Here is too near the village and the church. And the words seemed wholly right and natural. He did not dream of questioning them. He understood that, with this little touch of civilization in sight, the familiarity he suggested was impossible. Once out upon the open mountains, amidst the freedom of huge slopes and towering peaks, the stars and moon to witness and the wilderness of snow to watch, they could taste an innocence of happy intercourse. They could taste an innocence of happy intercourse free from the dead conventions that imprison literal minds. He urged his pace, yet did not quite overtake her. The girl kept always just a little bit ahead of his best efforts, and soon they left the trees behind and passed on to the enormous slopes of the sea of snow that rolled in mountains, a mountainous terror and beauty to the stars. The wonder of the wide world caught him away. Under the steady moonlight it was more than haunting. It was a living, white, bewildering power that deliciously confused the senses and laid a spell of wild perplexity upon the heart. It was a personality that cloaked and yet revealed itself through all the sheeted whiteness of snow. It rose went with him, fled before, and followed after. Slowly it dropped lithe, gleaming arms about his neck, gathering him in. Certainly some soft persuasion coaxed his very soul, urging him ever forwards, upwards, on towards the highest icy slopes. Judgment and reason left their throne, it seemed, completely, as in the madness of intoxication. The girl, slim and seductive, kept always just ahead, so that he never quite came up with her. He saw the white enhancement of her face and figure, something that streamed about her neck, flying like a wreath of snow in the wind, and heard the alluring accent of her whispering voice that called from time to time. A little farther on, a little higher. Then we'll run home together. Sometimes he saw her hand stretched out to find his own, but each time, just as he came up with her, he saw her still in front, the hand and arm withdrawn. They took a gentle angle of ascent. The toil seemed nothing. In this crystal, wine-like air, fatigue vanished. The sishing of the ski through the powdery surface of the snow was the only sound that broke the stillness. This, with his breathing and the rustle of her skirts, was all he heard. Cold moonshine, snow, and silence held the world. The sky was black, and the peaks beyond cut into it like frosted wedges of iron and steel. Far below the valley slept the village long since hidden out of sight. He felt that he could never tire. The sound of the church clock rose from time to time faintly through the air, more and more distant. Give me your hand. It's time now to turn back. Just one more slope, she laughed. That reach above us. Then we'll make for home. And her low voice mingled pleasantly with the purring of their ski. His own seemed harsh and ugly by comparison. But I have never come so high before. It's glorious. This world of silent snow and moonlight. And you're a child of the snow, I swear. Let me come up closer to see your face and touch your little hand. Her laugh answered him. Come on, a little higher. Here we're quite alone together. It's magnificent, he cried. But why did you hide away so long? I've looked and searched for you in vain ever since we skated. He was going to say 10 days ago, but the accurate memory of time had gone from him. He was not sure whether it was days or years or minutes. His thoughts of Earth were scattered and confused. You looked for me in the wrong places, he heard her murmur just above him. You looked in places where I never go. Hotels and houses kill me. I avoid them. She laughed, a fine, shrill, windy little laugh. I loathe them too. He stopped. The girl had suddenly come quite close. A breath of ice passed through his very soul. She had touched him. But it's awful cold, he cried out sharply. This freezing cold that takes me. The wind is rising. It's a wind of ice. Come, let us turn. But when he plunged forward to hold her, or at least to look, the girl was gone again. And something in the way she stood there a few feet beyond and stared down into his eyes so steadfast, in silence, made him shiver. The moonlight was behind her, but in some odd way he could not focus sight upon her face, although so close. The gleam of ice he caught, but all the rest seemed white and snowy, as though he looked beyond her, out into space. The sound of the church bell came up faintly from the valley far below, and he counted the strokes. 5. A sudden, curious weakness seized him as he listened. Deep within it was, deadly yet somehow sweet, and hard to resist. He felt like sinking down upon the snow and lying there. They had been climbing for 5 hours. It was, of course, the warning of complete exhaustion. With a great effort, he fought and overcame it. It passed away as suddenly as it came. "We'll turn," he said with a decision he hardly felt. "It will be dawn before we reach the village again. Come at once. It's time for home." The sense of exhilaration had utterly left him. An emotion that was akin to fear swept coldly through him, but her whispering answer turned it instantly to terror. A terror that gripped him horribly and turned him weak and unresisting. "Our home is here!" A burst of wind, high laughter, loud and shrill, accompanied the words. It was like a whistling wind. The wind had arisen, and clouds obscured the moon. The moon, a little higher, where we cannot hear the wicked bells. She cried, and for the first time seized him deliberately by the hand. She moved, was suddenly close against his face, and again she touched him. And Hibbert tried to turn away and escape, and so trying, found for the first time that the power of the snow, that utter power which does not exhilarate but deadens effort, was upon him. The suffocating weakness that it brings to exhausted men, luring them to sleep of death in her clinging soft embrace, lulling the will and conquering all desire for life. This was awfully upon him. His feet were heavy and entangled. He could not turn or move. The girl stood in front of him, very near. He felt her chilly breath upon his cheek. Her hair passed blindingly across his eyes, and that icy wind came with her. He saw her whiteness close. Again, it seemed, his sight passed through her into space, as though she had no face. Her arms were round his neck. She drew him softly downwards to his knees. He sank. He yielded utterly. He obeyed. Her weight was upon him, smothering, delicious. The snow was to his waist. She kissed him softly on the lips, the eyes, all over his face. And then she spoke his name in that voice of love and wonder, the voice that held the accent of two others, both taken over long ago by death, the voice of his mother and of the woman he had loved. He made one more feeble effort to resist. Then, realizing even while he struggled that this soft weight about his heart was sweeter than anything life could ever bring, he'd let his muscles relax and sank back into the soft oblivion of the covering snow. Her wintry kisses bore him to sleep. They say that men who know the sleep of exhaustion in the snow find no awakening on the hither side of death. The hours passed, and the moon sank down below the white world's rim. Then, suddenly, there came a little crash upon his breast and neck, and Hibbert awoke. He slowly turned bewildered, heavy eyes upon the desolate mountains, stared dizzily about him, tried to rise. At first his muscles would not act. A numbing, a aching pain possessed him. He uttered a long, thin cry for help, and heard its faintness swallowed by the wind. And then he understood vaguely why he was only warm, not dead. For this very wind that took his cry had built up a sheltering mound of driven snow against his body while he slept. Like a curving wave, it ran beside him. It was the breaking of its overtoppling edge that caused the crash, and the coldness of mass against his neck that woke him. Dawn kissed the eastern sky. Pale gleams of gold shot every peak with splendor, but ice was in the air, and the dry and frozen snow blew like powder from the surface of the slopes. He saw the points of his ski projecting just below him. Then he remembered. It seems he had just strength enough to realize that, could he but rise and stand, he might fly with a terrific impetus towards the woods and village far beneath. The ski would carry him. But if he failed and fell? How he contrived it, Hibbert never knew. This fear of death somehow called out his whole available reserve force. He rose slowly, balanced a moment, then, taking the angle of an immense zigzag, started down the awful slopes like an arrow from a bow. And automatically, the splendid muscles of the practiced skier and athlete saved and guided him, for he was hardly conscious of controlling either speed or direction. The snow stung face and eyes like fine steel shot. Ridge after ridge flew past. The summits raced across the sky. The valley leaped up with bounds to meet him. He scarcely felt ground beneath his feet as the huge slopes and distance melted before the lightning speed of that descent from death to life. He took it in 4-mile-long zigzags, and it was the turning at each corner that nearly finished him, for then the strain of balancing taxed to the verge of collapse the remnants of his strength. Slopes that had taken hours to climb can be descended in short half-hour on ski, but Hibbert had lost all count of time. Quite other thoughts and feelings mastered him in that wild, swift dropping through the air that was like the flight of a bird. Forever close upon his heels came following forms and voices with the whirling snow dust. He heard that little silvery voice of death and laughter at his back. Shrill and wild, with the whistling of the wind past his ears, he caught its pursuing tones, but in anger now, no longer soft and coaxing, and it was accompanied. She did not follow alone. It seemed a host of these flying figures of the snow chased madly just behind him. He felt them furiously smite his neck and cheeks, snatch at his hands and try to entangle his feet and ski in drifts. His eyes they blinded, and they caught his breath away. The terror of the heights and snow and winter desolation urged him forward in the maddest race with death a human being ever knew. And so terrific was the speed that before the gold and crimson had left the summits to touch the ice lips of the lower glaciers, he saw the friendly forest far beneath swing up and welcome him. And it was then, moving slowly along the edge of the woods, he saw a light. A man was carrying it. A procession of human figures was passing in a dark line laboriously through the snow. And he heard the sound of chanting. Instinctively, without a second's hesitation, he changed his course. No longer flying at an angle as before, he pointed his ski straight down the mountainside. The dreadful steepness did not frighten him. He knew full well it meant a crashing tumble at the bottom, but he also knew it meant a doubling of his speed, with safety at the end. For, though no definite thought passed through his mind, he understood that it was the village curé who carried that little gleaming lantern in the dawn, and that he was taking the host to a chalet on the lowering slopes, to some peasant in extremis. He remembered her terror of the church and bells. She feared the holy symbols. There was one last wild cry in his ears as he started, a shriek at the wind before his face, and a rush of stinging snow against closed eyelids, and then he dropped through empty space, speak to sight from him. It seemed he flew off the surface of the world. Indistinctly, he recalls the murmur of men's voice, the touch of strong arms that lifted him, and the shooting pains as the ski were unfastened from the twisted angle. For when he opened his eyes again to normal life, he found himself lying in his bed at the post office with a doctor at his side. But for years to come, the story of mad Hibbert skiing at night is recounted in that mountain village. He went, it seems, up slopes and to a height that no man in his senses ever tried before. The tourists were agog about it for the rest of the... The tourists were agog about it for the rest of the season, and the very same day, 2 of the bolder men went over the actual ground and photographed the slopes. Later, Hibbert saw these photographs. He noticed one curious thing about them. though he did not mention it to anyone. There was only a single track. Good story, very interesting. I don't think I've ever read anything related to how like a person gets bewitched like that. It was very cool. Very cool. Thank you for listening, everyone. Thank you so much. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. I'm just seeing that someone gifted me. Thank you so much for the gift from Throne. I really appreciate it. That is so sweet and kind. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. It was a lot of fun to read these. Thank you once again for hanging out with me on Christmas Eve. I hope you all have a wonderful time with your families if you celebrate Christmas. I will be off for the next 2 days as I need to spend time with my own family. I'm going over tomorrow and probably will spend all day with my mom. Thank you guys so much for well, it's not the last stream of the year, but I feel like saying thank you for the wonderful year that we had together. I hope it's been a good time for you so far, and we're gonna continue having good time in the future as well. I'm gonna rate you guys into Fuji. It's because I haven't been streaming ASMR. It's been forever since we rated her, but I really love Fuji's ASMR. It is always so comforting. She has such like a sweet and like positive tone in her voice. I don't really know how to put it. I hope you're gonna have a good time with her. Take care. A very Merry Christmas once again. I really appreciate you all. I hope you will receive nice presents. If you do that in your families, I hope you're gonna get nice presents. And I'll see you all next time. Bye bye.